Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Senate Bill 458 deals with what was last year's bill, Senate Bill number 139. It became Act number 280 and was part of the criminal reform effort. Within that bill that became law, on page 34, there's a discussion of medical treatment furlough. Medical treatment furlough is different. It was a different animal because it allowed offenders to receive medical treatment outside of the jail. Medical parole is different than medical treatment furlough. Medical parole was different, and under the guidelines of medical parole, which is section 574.20 subsection B, medical parole could not be given to any person who had been convicted of first-degree murder or second-degree murder. Under medical treatment furlough, however, that exception was not made. As y'all remember, when we discussed these bills many times, people said this is not for violent offenders. And we know that when our DAs decide to charge someone with first or second-degree murder, that is some of the most heinous crimes that we have happen in our state. Because the first and second degree murder exception was not given in subsection C, medical treatment furlough, there has been a plethora of folks in our criminal justice system who have been convicted and are serving time under first and second degree murder to ask for a medical furlough. The problem with that is that the families of the victims have to travel to Baton Rouge and attend these hearings and basically relive what happened. They have to relive it, and it is unconscionable to make these families do that. So my bill addresses this problem very clearly, and it says basically that we will exclude those folks who have committed first and second degree murder from the ability to get a medical furlough. Now, medical furlough is envisioned to mean that offender who's committed first and second degree murder, if my bill doesn't pass, this is what will happen. If they've committed first or second degree murder and they are incapacitated by some guidelines set up by DOC or the Probation and Parole Board, that person will be released from Angola and sent to a nursing home in our community. And they will be cared for, unbeknownst to the staff, unbeknownst to any other patient or client of that nursing home, that person is there. And once again, this bill only excludes people who have committed first and second degree murder. We do have an amendment, though, to address some other concerns that have come up since the bill was filed, and I would like for that amendment to be discussed at this time.
All right, if we'd pass out the amendment and just give us a moment, Senator Gatti, to get it in hand. Is it a long amendment?
It is 41 lines, 42 lines.
All right, well, since it's not that long, go ahead and tell us about it as it's passed out.
On lines 13 through 15 of the it basically says that neither the department nor the warden of the correctional facility shall recommend that the offender's sentence be commuted for any medical reasons contemplated in this section. There is some concern that that this request for medical treatment furlough or it should come from the doctors and the nurses that are there at the prison. It shouldn't be strictly for money savings efforts. It also, on line 28 of the amendment, it limits under Section 4 how many times the offender can ask for medical parole or medical treatment furlough. Currently, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Currently, there is no provision to stop the offender from coming back every 30 or 60 days to ask for a new hearing. I've been informed by staff that there is already a 6-month to 2-year or 3-year window that is allowed in between hearings based on the severity of the crime. On line 31, and this is the most important part for when we go back home, line 31 basically says that within 7 days of the decision of the committee on parole to grant medical parole or medical leave furlough to an offender, the department shall notify any off-site medical facility designated for an eligible offender's medical treatment of the decision. So that's notice to the hospital. That's notice to the nursing home. That notice is not required right now, but it's important, I think, for our rural communities to know when they're going to be receiving someone who, although at the time they may look like they are incapacitated, that we know when they get good care at a nursing home, they're going to get better. And so as they get better, they need to know what the person is there for. Under subsection B on page 35, the off-site facility shall, not less than 14 days before the offender begins treatment at the facility, provide notice to its patients or residents that they will be receiving treatment in that facility. That's important because many times we have folks in our district that are at a nursing home, and they need to know if one of these offenders moves into their nursing home. The situation that we're afraid of happening is someone's grandma's in room 3 and bed 1, and they move an offender in next to her or him, and that would be a tough decision for the family to find out after maybe something happened. You see? Lastly, the off-site facility would be obligated not less than 14 days before the offender begins treatment to provide notice to the next of kin, because many times when our constituents or when we have to put someone in a nursing home, they are incapacitated. They cannot make decisions for themselves. Either they are not ambulatory, they have Alzheimer's, they have a severe disability, and we as next of kin, we need to know from the treatment facility that person is there. This isn't a new thing in our law. Anytime a sex offender moves into your neighborhood, you get a little postcard. This would be the same kind of notice. That's what the amendment does, and I would
all right.
answer any questions.
Senator Gatti has asked that we offer Amendment 1010. I'll do that. I don't see any questions, and so that'll put the bill in the posture that you've requested. So I'll make the motion that the amendment be accepted. Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. So now the bill is in the posture that you've asked that it be placed in. You have a guest with you?
That's correct. Mr. Chairman, I would just like to introduce Mr. Dennis Bamberg. He was one of the first victims who had to come testify in front of the Probation and Parole Committee about a heinous crime that happened to his mother. And so we would like to give him some time to tell his story and to talk to the committee. He is driven from South Bossier Parish this morning, so he had to leave about 2:30 to get here on time. We appreciate you taking us first, by the way. Thank you.
Happy to. Welcome to GC. Welcome to the Capitol. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
My name's Dennis Bamberg, and I appreciate y'all letting me speak before you today. But I'm a victim of this, and I think a lot of times people don't understand what you go through. I would have never dreamed when this started the things that we've had to go through on this. First, the crime that he committed. Well, first I was 15 years old at the time. Left for school. They came, got me from school, and when I came home, my mother had been murdered. The house had burned to the ground. And my dad was so distraught that he couldn't help out much. So it's just, your life just goes from great to nothing. And you don't know what to do and where to start at. But Clyde Giddens admitted in his own words, he told them that what he had did is he had come in and stabbed my mother, that he had took and dismembered the body. He cut the arms and legs off, put it in a bag, set the house on fire, and escaped into the woods right across the road. Said while he was in the woods, some dogs came by, and he stopped and took parts of her body out, and cut the meat from the bone and fed it to the dogs like it was hamburger meat, and he got a thrill out of that. He also said that when he was cutting her body up and cutting the body parts off, that he had a knife that had like a saw blade, and he laughed and said the more he cut, the more he laughed. This is his words. All of this was confirmed by the autopsy that was done. The autopsy said the major portions of the arms, hands, legs, and feet were not with the torso when the torso burns. It said examination reveals that we have a mutilation death. It was other things that locked him to the crime. There's no question he did the crime, and he admitted it. So we get ready to go to trial, and he's being trial for the death penalty. We got down the first morning of the trial, and they had failed to file some kind of a form that needed to be filed so many days before the hearing could start, trial could start. So they had to delay it. And they said they was going to have to get a new jury, let all the witnesses go back and re-subpoena them, and it'd be several months before the calendar we could start the trial. Well, Clyde Giddens, the guy that committed the murder, asked through his attorney that he be allowed to plead guilty without capital punishment. So the district attorney called my dad, my sister, and myself into a room and told us that you have two options. We'll continue with the death trial, and we feel sure that he'll get it, but you've got to understand that that's going to take a while. You're going to have to relive this a number of times. Then it's going to be appeals for the death penalty. Or you can accept the plea. He will be confined at Angola for the rest of his life at hard labor, and it's over. You don't have to go through it anymore. So we decided as a family that we really felt like, of course, we was be glad that it was over and we didn't have to relive it, but we also thought that it would be more punishment to him to have to live and spend the rest of it, knowing he's got to spend the rest of his life at Angola and have to think every day what he did. So we accepted, and we thought it was over. Well, 7 or 8 years later, we received a letter from the pardon board or someone, and they said Clyde had applied for a clemency hearing. We had no idea what a clemency hearing was. Went down and they told us that, and first the district attorney, we wanted to be sure that he was going to be at Angola, and he said, well, here's what's going to happen. He has agreed to plead guilty, and his sentence is going to be natural life plus 10 years for arson. That's for burning the house. And he said, natural life is no certain set years, not an amount of years. It means until you die. So he said, I can promise you he will be at Angola until he dies. So we said, we agree to it. We get this clemency hearing, so I go down and ask them what the clemency hearing was about, and they said, well, he had applied to have his sentence cut to a certain number of years. And then if they agreed, they'd set his sentence at a certain number of years, and then he would, a certain percent of that served, he'd be eligible to apply for parole. Well, we have been to many, many of those hearings, and we realized that day that what we did when we allowed him life in Angola, we also allowed our life to be disrupted for all these years. And we had to spend all of our time to go back down ever so often, relive the crime. And it just, you've got to prepare for it, you've got to go down, you've got to relive it and tell people so they know what happened there. I don't like to go through it. I never discuss this away from the hearing board here. And it just keeps your family disrupted your whole life. I'm 70 years old now. I've been doing this. This happened when I was 15. And so, but, you know, and we thought that we wouldn't have to do that. Well, the last hearing we went to, the clemency hearing, was a little over a year ago. and they denied it again, 5-0, which we appreciate. And we thought, well, maybe it's over. Maybe he'll die before he has another hearing, and it'll finally be over. We can only talk about, then we can talk about the good things that Mama done and the fun times that we had, not how she was killed or things like that. So we left there, and we thought maybe it's over. It was right before Christmas. We got another letter to come down that Clyde had applied for this medical parole. That's what it had on there. So I read the bill to try to see what was in it. I told my wife, I said, they've got this all wrong. I said, we need to call him because he don't qualify. He's first-degree murder, and you don't qualify. I said, well, she said, you sure? I said, well, let me read it again. Well, what I had done, when I saw the part I liked, I stopped reading. Right down below it, it did say, if you don't qualify up here, then you qualify down here for medical treatment furlough. So I was wrong. We came down to the hearing, and it was 3-0 vote against it. So we appreciate that. But I just wanted y'all to know how the victim, from their side, what you have to go through your whole life. You can never, my kids never got to see their grandmother. I mean, y'all know all those things, but I mean, it's just having to go back and relive it time and time and time again. When we were told way back in 1964 that you're through with this, if you agree to this, he will be at Angola until he dies. And I can tell you, we live next door to it. We live close to him in a small community up there. Never heard of a crime like this. And his family was a good family. Clyde was older than I was, but we hunted together and all. And he had younger brothers and sisters. I still consider them friends. They didn't do this. The family was a good family. They hate it just as bad. They hate it too. And so it's nothing. It's just he's the guy that did it.
Yes,
and
sir.
He's still that person. And if you allow him to get to where he can,
Get a little bit closer to the mic.
He'll hurt somebody again, given opportunity.
Yes, sir. Well, we appreciate you traveling all this distance to put a face to this legislation for us, and we have a lot of people in favor, we have people against, and we have people that are here for information. So I don't see any questions by the committee members. Just because somebody turns in a red card and says they're against, I don't think that means they're not sympathetic to your situation.
That's right.
But that's the process that we're going to go through.
Okay.
So, Senator Gatti, do you have any other folks that you'd like to have the opportunity to speak?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe so. Several of his family members drove down with him, but they just, it's very tough for them to talk about this, and they understand that Mr. Bamberg's the spokesman at this time for the family.
All right. So I have green cards in support of the bill. One from Mr. Dennis Bamberg Sr., Dennis Bamberg Jr. Checked that he would like to speak. You can if you wish. Then we also have Jacob Langen, and we have Marjorie Bamberg, all in favor. You don't have to speak. I think it would be hard to do a better job than Mr. Dennis Bamberg did. At this time, I'd like to ask Miss Natalie Laborde to come forward, and Mr. James Dixon. They have provided white cards and Mr. Bamberg to give us a good understanding of what he's been through, talked about several different hearings that he had gone through and the length of time, but I want the committee to understand, just as it relates to this bill, what the procedures are, and that I understand it from his point of view, but I'd like the department's actual procedures on these things. Can you illuminate that for us, Ms. Laborde?
Yes, sir. So as was previously mentioned, this was part of the criminal justice reform package that was passed last year. And the process delineated by the department is that first at the individual unit, so in Angola, for example, the medical staff who is assigned to the unit where the offender is will make a recommendation to their medical director as to whether or not this person would qualify. There's a medical assessment done if they meet the nursing home criteria, if they're immobilized and have other severely debilitating medical needs, then the recommendation will proceed from the medical director to the warden. The warden is responsible for determining the public safety aspect of it. So he will make a recommendation if he determines that this person, if he were put in a nursing home, he or she wouldn't be a risk to the public under the supervision of probation and parole. Once that recommendation proceeds, then it then goes to the medical director at our headquarters, who makes a determination from a medical standpoint whether or not the director agrees with the assessment done by the medical director at the unit. If it passes through there, then it then goes to the secretary, and the secretary will make a determination whether or not he will stop someone from proceeding to the board for a hearing, and those hearings go through the normal process as any other parole or medical parole, with the notice being done to the family. I believe it's a 60-day notice, and as in this case, the family certainly can come and testify and give their standpoint in terms of whether or not this should go forward.
Okay, so as I understand, you have several internal processes that happen, and then for lack of a better term, a public comment section. As far as the people that are on the board that are making the decision, how many members, and does it have to be unanimous or not?
I believe if it's a 3-member panel, it has to be unanimous. If it's a 5-member, it has to be 4 out of 5.
All right. Mr. Dixon, do you have any additional information for information purposes?
The only thing I would add is to make the distinction between parole and furlough, because they are two distinct entities.
Furlough,
is you're getting out for medical treatment and or end of life treatment. You're not. And there's also a security aspect to that furlough. And so you are talking two separate things, and it's a very important distinction. Furlough means you're still in custody.
Furlough means you're coming. We'll get you better, and then we send you back.
Right.
Exactly.
There's a
parole means we get you better, and you're not coming back.
There is a provision for medical parole. There is a provision for that, but in terms of this program, yes. If there is any, if the person's current medical condition recedes, or if they get better, there's a procedure in place to bring that person back.
Okay, and I don't know that. We have a couple of members of finance. The state pays for your treatment out of the general fund while you're in custody, and Medicare, Medicaid pays for your treatment if you're out of state custody. Would that apply to furlough as well? I can't recall.
That is correct. The in terms of Medicaid, if you were previously eligible, once you're incarcerated, that payment is cut off. But if you are placed onto parole or parole, then the Medicaid payments do apply. And so that was generally, in terms of the task force, when they looked at our aging population, especially at Angola, where we have many of our lifers, we're having these palliative units where a majority of the staff are dedicated to. And so they were looking at ways that they could utilize these medical dollars for those who are incapacitated in these beds. So when they are removed to a nursing home facility, then the Medicaid dollars pay, I believe, 90%. Whereas if they're in the DOC facility, it's 100% out of the general fund.
All right, we have some questions from members. The queue is Perry, White, Mills, Cologne. Senator Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Were y'all here for the gentleman's testimony?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
So under his situation, if I understood it correctly, the parole wouldn't apply. It would be more of the furlough, because
Correct.
he
This
ain't
person
getting
was
out.
not eligible for medical parole based on his crime that he was convicted of.
Is there an approved list of nursing home facilities that DOC works with?
And I apologize, I don't have a list, but there are certain ones that are open to taking these types of individuals, and they're around the state. There's a couple that we're working with in terms of if this program increases, but yes, there are certain facilities that are interested in taking this population and have in the past taken medical paroles as well.
So there's no, at current time or even in future discussions, do you see that it's a mandate on any nursing home?
No, they absolutely have the ability to deny this type of person or offender.
Okay, so and very quickly, walk me through, and your point of the differentiation between the parole and the furlough is excellent. I think that's very important. So what's the difference for the parole? I mean, once they're on parole, does DOCD even... I mean,
they are supervised. So with the medical parole, there's not a restriction as to whether or not they go to a nursing home facility, and there's also a restriction on the type of offender. So first and second degree, and those who are sentenced to death are excluded from medical parole. Medical treatment furlough, it is open in terms of eligibility to all offenders other than those sentenced to death. However, there's a requirement that they have to go to a nursing home facility, and then they are supervised by probation and parole while they are at that facility.
Okay, last question. So let's say that this would become law under the situation, and I don't mean to keep going back to the gentleman, but in a similar situation, someone who is in life, in Angola for life, not capital, but in life, if this bill would be in place, the treatment is just provided there at Angola?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your question, Senator White.
Thank you. I didn't catch your name.
I'm sorry, James T. Dixon Jr. I'm with the Louisiana Public Defender Board.
Mr. Dixon. Okay. I think we heard testimony from Mr. Vanberg, this heinous crime committed against his mother.
Yes, sir.
Probably 50 years ago.
Yes, sir.
And as he testified, the DA asked him, would they consider life in prison if it was life, if life meant life?
Yes.
And as a convenience, I think you hear a lot of folks, that saves money, okay? We don't have to go back to trial on a first-degree murder. It saves hundreds of thousands of dollars. Back in 50 years ago, I don't know what it saved. So it was done to save money. And what I'm hearing today, they can get their treatment, but what Laborde, what you just testified to, when you're incarcerated, it's more expensive because you don't get the Medicaid payments. True?
That's correct. And I want to reiterate that I'm relating back to the decision that the task force, when they looked at the geriatric population, how they came up with this concept.
I'm very much familiar, and I was lobbied 100 times on it. But it saves money again. But again, this family was told that this person would get life for the heinous crime that he committed in murdering his mother, cutting her up and feeding her to dogs and then burning her. So life meant life to their family. It doesn't mean some other time in the future that this person could be released. It's at some point this body has to come back to the realization that life means life in some very extreme, heinous crimes. And I may ask him that on closing, but I think that's the point that he was making, that they were told life was life to save money, and now they're being told that they can furlough them and put them in another facility because it saves money, because then Medicaid's going to pick it up, and I have to be on finance. But in some cases, I'm willing to spend the extra money by the state because this family was made a promise. Thank you.
Understand.
Thank you, Senator White. Senator Mills.
I'll pass. I heard.
Okay. Senator Cologne, do you still wish to ask a question? All right. So that's for information. We appreciate you guys helping us understand the distinction between parole and furlough. We have a number of red cards, and I'm going to read the red cards. We have those that wish to speak, and then we have those that are opposed. I'm going to read well, we got a few more cards. Let me put them in proper order. All right. Okay, so we have, looks like two that would wish to speak. Will Harrell from New Orleans, if you'd come forward, and John Burkhart, also from New Orleans. Would you come forward? And I have other red cards that have indicated they do not wish to speak. And I'll read those after you. You are...
Hi, I'm John Burkhart.
All right, Mr. Howell or Hamill?
Harold.
Harold, is he here? All right.
Out in the hall. I'll go get him.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Steve's a regular at the Capitol, so I know Steve.
All right, well, thank you, Mr.
Yeah, go ahead,
All
Burkhart.
right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members. My name is John Burkhart. I'm with the Southern Poverty Law Center, and with them, I've been behind a coalition called Louisianans for Prison Alternatives. And last year, we played a role in helping push through the Justice Reinvestment Package that went through this very committee. I do want to say that ourselves and a lot of other folks that were behind JRI, the very first motivation was the public safety aspect, and nobody likes to hear the story that we just heard and condone that or wish to see that replicated. So that is very much in the spirit of JRI. Also here to talk about how the medical furlough was extended in the spirit of JRI, because the purpose of reinvestment was to save money for our criminal justice system and to reinvest into programs that make us safer down the line, that lower recidivism, save us money, and improve our communities. These furloughs and the cost savings associated with them are very much in the spirit of the JRI process. And also, as a frequent visitor to Angola and our state's prisons, I can attest to the growing gray hairs and just the aging population that is there. I've met, they'll say that some folks they might not want to see out, but there are a number who have made remarkable changes with their time there and with their reflection and with their punishment. And so I just see Senate Bill 458 as a way to inflict one more punishment on very sick and infirm and incapacitated individuals at the cost of taxpayers, and I just don't think that's a good use of our money. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Burkhart. Mr. Burkhart has appeared and spoken in opposition to the bill. I'm going to read some cards. Mary Yannick is opposed. She's from New Orleans and would speak if requested. Latoya Lewis is opposed and would speak if requested. Shannon Scott from Baton Rouge is opposed. Jenny Hastings from Baton Rouge opposed. Sarah Mochikala, I butchered that, but opposed. Julie Harris, that's an easy one, opposed. Liz Mangum, opposed. Jennifer Harding, opposed. Elizabeth Powers, opposed. Stephanie Gaskell, opposed. Barbara Van Prum, opposed. Mary Diggs, opposed. Cammie Martrin, opposed. The Right Reverend Joe Doss, opposed. Michael Cahoon, opposed. Mr. Alexander from Lake Charles is opposed. Annette O'Connor, opposed. Pat Trahan, opposed. Tony Landry, opposed. Stephen Kaufman, opposed. We had wishing to speak Will Harrell. I don't see him. Lorraine Edmonds. Oh, all right, thank you. Opposed. Brandy has provided a card in support. I made a motion earlier to adopt Senate 1010, Amendment 1010. Turns out I didn't have a quorum when I made that motion, but that's the posture that the author wanted the bill in, so I'm going to make the motion again that we accept Amendment 1010 to the bill. Any opposition? Staff has given me the thumbs up that I got it right this time. Senator Gatti, if you'd come forward and close on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to apologize because I misspoke earlier. Dennis Bamberg Jr. is here, and he would just like a few minutes to speak, and then I'll close right after that very quickly.
Okay, just a moment, Senator Barrow.
I just wanted to ask Senator Gatti his intent, because I'm sorry, I was late, and I missed the very beginning of your intent, since it's drawn so much opposition. But I'll wait to hear from the gentleman, and maybe you can just kind of expound upon that in your closing.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and the gentleman with you is?
It's Dennis Bamberg Jr.
Okay, welcome to the Capitol, Mr. Bamberg. Floor is yours.
Thank you for just a few brief moments, and hopefully all the red cards were turned in prior to my father's story today. But I attended the meeting for medical furlough, and the gentleman that sat here and said that community safety was the first and foremost concern when they put this legislation through probably wasn't sitting in there when they said that his upper arm strength was a 3 of 5. His lower limb strength was a 3 of 5, which means that if he's in there with any of the members that filled out a red card in opposition today, if he's in the bed next to their family, that this gentleman can pick up a knife unless he's under 24-hour security watch, which I do not believe is part of this program, that he can pick up a knife and brutally murder someone within the confines of the facility that this person's in. So it sickens me that there were so many red cards, and like I said, benefit of the doubt is they came in before my father spoke and told him what this bill currently allows to happen in this, and I just don't think that there's any amount of money that we can save on these individuals that would make this something that should not go forward.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bamberg. The way we try to do in this committee is let the senator close without interruption. So if we have questions, I'd like them to be posed now. If anybody has any further questions. Any further questions? Okay. Senator Barrow.
I do.
All right.
So, Senator Gatti, your intent when you bought this bill was to actually give individuals who are, I'm assuming, kind of in a bad medical state, an opportunity to be able to go to a nursing home, but the nursing home doesn't necessarily have to accept them, correct, or have some alternative care.
Well, let me back up.
Okay.
You know, last year we passed Senate Bill 139, and it passed. Some voted for it, some voted against it, but it passed. It became Act 820. It's a 38-page bill. And when many of us read it, we considered the restriction for first and second degree murder for medical parole. Because if you commit first or second degree murder, you don't get medical parole. Mm-hmm. You don't get to get out, get your medical treatment, and then become free. Because that would undermine what the DAs and the families agreed on at the time of their hearing. So there's already a restriction in the medical provisions that if you can't have medical parole if you've committed first or second degree murder, which is reserved by our DAs for the most heinous crimes. Typically manslaughter is right below that, and some other crimes of murder, crimes of passion, you know. But first and second degree are the under 12, over 65, law enforcement officer. It's when you kill somebody while you're raping them, kidnapping them, that litany of crimes that I know y'all are familiar with. Well, under Section C, medical treatment furlough, that's when someone, you know, they're going out for treatment, but they're coming back to jail, okay, when they get well. Medical treatment furlough, which we all thought had the first and second degree exception, it does not have the first and second degree exception in the law. So what has happened since the bill became law is that first and second degree murderers are applying to get out of jail to go to a nursing home for their treatment. Now we know at Angola, trustees take care of these elderly gentlemen. They give them 24-hour care. We've been, you know, some of us have been there to visit. You've seen the care that they get. They're not wanting for anything.
Correct.
Okay. Now we know in our nursing homes that are approved by Medicaid, and you sit on finance, people don't get 24-hour care with someone sitting by their bed, rotating them to making sure they don't get decubitus ulcers. It's very tough to get the level of care that is given at Angola because there is a plethora of free workers at Angola who want to serve in that capacity, to do specifically end-of-life care. They build the caskets. Before that, they care for them. They have services for them when they die. Okay? So one of the first people to apply for this medical furlough was Clyde Giddens. He said to a reporter for the Washington Post, "I'm just in here. I'm an old man. There's nothing wrong with me. I got into a bar fight, stabbed a guy, and I've been here my whole life. I should get out." He said that to the Washington Post. Well, that wasn't the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. He attacked Dennis Bamberg's grandmother 55 years ago, even before Dennis was born. Dennis's father, who was 15 at the time, came to the house. It was on fire. They found parts of the body inside the house, parts of the body out in the field. Clyde Giddens admitted that he cut her up, he killed her, he burned down her house, and he saw some dogs along the way, and he fed dogs portions of her body. Mr. Bamberg testified earlier that this family has had to go back for numerous clemency hearings, all of which have been denied. So now this person is using the medical furlough system to say, "Oh, I had a stroke, I had a broken hip." And I think he has to keep getting these hearings, and they may have to go back every 30 days. He may just keep reapplying. And the scariest thing is, Senator Barrow, is that if somebody doesn't show up to say, "Hey, wait a minute, he's not telling the truth. He didn't get into a bar fight. He killed a woman. He chopped up a woman and fed her to dogs." If that person doesn't show up, then we could have a situation where a first-degree murderer is allowed to go to a Baton Rouge nursing home.
Okay.
And so what this bill does is it gives the first and second degree murder exception that was already ready for medical parole. It brings it down to medical furlough. That's all the bill does. It also provides a notice requirement. That's the Amendment 1010 that we talked about.
Okay.
Because if your mom or grandmother or family member who has Alzheimer's is in a nursing home, wouldn't you want to know the person in the bed next to him committed first or second degree murder or is on a felony medical furlough? You may decide, you know what, I'm going to take grandma home, or I'm going to put her in another facility.
Okay.
So that's basically what the bill does. And in closing, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we're taking a couple of questions here. So thank you for answering Senator Barrow's question. Senator Barrow.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Thank you, Senator Barrow.
Senator Carter has a question or two.
Senator Gatti, I commend you for what I think you're trying to attempt, and I think that for the survivors of the individual that suffered such a horrific death, our heart goes out. That is unconscionable to think that a person would have to meet that untimely, unnecessary, awful fate. And I appreciate the sympathies for that, and I offer my own as well. I'm not sure that when we think about percentages of people who fall in that category versus those who legitimately would get caught in the unintended consequences, that we are balancing this properly. I like the intent. I don't like the potential outcome of the ones that get caught in the drag. So I wanted to just say, out of respect for you, as my colleague and friend, but also for the family, why I would be opposing the bill, not on its principle, but because I think the net that it cast is wider than it should be.
All right. Thank you, Senator Carter. Senator Gatti, there's no other questions, so if you would close on your bill.
Yeah, and Senator Carter, I'll start with what you said. I mean, we didn't say that no one could get a medical furlough. What we said was that right now we allow everyone to apply, from the child molester all the way to the guy that's a 3 strikes and you're out. So when we looked at which crimes are so bad that we all kind of already agreed they shouldn't get a medical parole. And there's only 2 crimes, first and second degree murder. Those are the first 2 in the code, just about. And they're set aside for the most heinous of all crimes. And what we've noticed at the hearing that I went to, because I went to the hearing, I filed this bill late because I actually went to the hearing. Dennis and I have been on mission trips together. He never told me this story. He never, in all the I've known him over a decade, he never shared this story with me. He called me out of a last resort and said, "Ryan, did you know this had happened?" And I said, "No, sir, I did not." So all this bill says is that many of us thought when we were voting for this bill that it did not include violent criminals. It is being interpreted to include violent criminals, and there is no notice provision available. You get more notice when a sex offender moves 500 yards from your house than when a murderer moves in 5 feet from your grandma at the nursing home. So I'd ask that you would approve this bill and allow it to continue through the process.
All right. Senator Gatti has closed on his bill. Is there a motion? Senator Perry has moved to report the bill as amended favorably. Is there, there's a substitute motion by Senator Carter. Senator Carter, what is your, Senator Carter has moved to defer. Is there any objection to Senator Carter's motion to defer? Senator Perry objects to the motion to defer. We will call the roll. Call the chairman last. I'm sorry. I want to explain the vote just to make sure that everybody understands. A motion, the substitute motion is to defer. So if we defer the bill, it'll essentially be returned to our calendar. If you vote yes, you're voting to defer it. If you vote no, you're voting not to defer it.
Senator Perry? No. Senator Barrow? No. Senator Carter?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Cologne? No. Senator Mills? No. Senator White? No. Senator Clater?
Chairman votes no. So we return to
6 nays and 1 yay.
Thank you. We return to the original motion of Senator Perry to report the bill favorably. Is there, as amended, I'm sorry. Is there any objection to report the bill favorably as amended? Senator Carter has objected to reporting the bill favorably as amended. Call the roll. Call the chairman last.
Senator Perry? Yes. Senator Barrow? No. Senator Carter? No. Senator Cologne? No. Senator Mills? Yes. Senator White? Yes. Senator Clater?
Yes.
Yes. 4 yeas, 3 nays.
All right. So the
Thank you,
bill
Mr.
will be
Chairman.
reported. Don't leave. The bill will be reported favorably. Senator Gatti has a bill, Senate Bill 79. You want to defer that for an additional period of time. Is that correct?
That's correct. Maybe you can clarify this rule of procedure for me. There is an amendment to this bill that I wanted the committee to see that was worked on by the staff. Is that correct?
Senate Bill 79. So we'll pass out the bill, the amendment. We'll put the amendment on the bill. We'll defer it so members have an opportunity to study it. Senator Carter offers the amendment. What's the amendment number? Amendment 1236. Is there any objection to accepting amendment number 1236? There's no objection. Senator Gatti, you want to voluntarily defer?
Voluntarily defer to give time to.
His amendment. All
This
right.
is my amendment. I just want to give amendment. I want to give the committee time to review it.
All right.
And today, we don't want to take up too much of your time talking about it.
All right. Well, thank you, Senator Gatti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.